In a small town filled with stories, a desperate grandfather and his granddaughter find more than just shelter in a restaurant. They discover the power of compassion, faith, and the unexpected warmth of human connection that can transform lives. But are all intentions as pure as they seem? Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stick with us until the end, because this story might be more surprising than you think. Snow fell in silent flakes that Sunday morning. Inside a small diner on the outskirts of Cold Springs, the warmth of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of bread baking in the oven. The chime of the doorbell broke through the cheerful conversations of the patrons. All eyes turned to an elderly man, his face weathered by time, cradling a girl who couldn't have been older than 8. His coat was soaked with melting snow, and his worn shoes left wet footprints on the wooden floor. The girl, pale and shivering, clung to her grandfather's chest, her wide eyes betraying hunger and exhaustion. The old man hesitated for a moment before walking toward the counter. On the other side, Jack Dempsey, the owner of the diner, glanced up. His expression carried the weariness of someone well acquainted with life's hardships, but his guarded posture conveyed suspicion. "What do you need, old man?" Jack asked, crossing his arms. The man took a deep breath, his voice trembling from the cold and his own unease. "My granddaughter is hungry. We just need something to eat." Jack raised an eyebrow, taking in their disheveled appearance. Scratching his chin, he let out a bitter chuckle. "Food? And how exactly do you plan to pay for it?" His voice was louder now, drawing the attention of the diners seated nearby. "We don't run a charity here." A heavy silence filled the room. The girl buried her face in her grandfather's chest as he stood there, struggling to hold on to his dignity despite the crushing weight of humiliation. Before the moment could worsen, a waitress named Hannah, her kind eyes framed by hastily tied-back hair, stepped out from behind the counter. Placing a steady hand on the old man's shoulder, she spoke softly. "Come with me." She led them to a table near the fireplace, where she gently placed the girl on a cushioned bench and draped her frail shoulders with a blanket from the emergency supply closet. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Hannah asked, kneeling to meet the girl's gaze. The child looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. "Lizzie," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Hannah smiled and stroked Lizzie's cheek. "Lizzie, I'm going to bring you something warm to eat. Just hold on a moment." As Hannah disappeared into the kitchen, Jack stormed after her, seething. "Have you lost your mind? Do you know how many freeloaders show up here? This isn't a soup kitchen." Hannah met his glare with unwavering resolve, holding a steaming bowl of soup in her hands. "Look at them, Jack. That little girl is about to collapse. Not everyone who knocks on your door is out to scam you." Jack sighed and returned to the counter, though his hard stare toward the elderly man still held a glint of doubt. Back at the table, Lizzie took her first spoonful of soup as her grandfather, finally relaxing his tense shoulders, began to share his story. "My wife passed away 2 years ago," he said, his eyes distant. "Since then, it's been one struggle after another. I lost my job, and what little we had is gone. Now we're living in the car." His voice broke into sobs. Despite her hunger, Lizzie reached out and held his hand, offering silent comfort. Before he could continue, Hannah returned, carrying fresh bread and a cup of hot tea. "We'll figure something out," she said softly, her gaze fixed on Lizzie. The warmth of the fireplace seemed to have transformed the small diner into a sanctuary, a place where the icy world outside could no longer cause harm. Lizzie slept soundly, wrapped in the blanket Hannah had given her, while her grandfather watched over her with a mix of relief and worry. Hannah placed another cup of tea in front of the old man. "Do you have anywhere to go?" she asked softly, as if afraid to wake the little girl. The man sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "No. After I lost my house, all we had left was the car, and now not even that. I tried so hard to get help before things got this bad. But no one would listen." Hannah's eyes shone with compassion. She sat down beside him, while Jack, pretending to stay busy at the counter, eavesdropped from afar. "What happened to her mother?" Hannah asked hesitantly. The man closed his eyes for a moment, as if bracing himself to respond. "My daughter, Clara, was a light in this world. She raised Lizzie on her own after her father, well, after he left. But last summer, Clara got sick. A fever the doctors couldn't control. In less than a month, she was gone." He swallowed hard, struggling to keep his composure. "I promised to take care of Lizzie. She's all I have left." Hannah glanced at the sleeping child, her golden curls spilling across the blanket. "You're doing your best. You just need a little help." Before he could respond, Ethan, who had been sitting quietly by the fireplace, lifted his gaze. "How old is she?" The old man looked at him, surprised by the sudden question. 8. "Why?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering, his voice low and almost hesitant. "She reminds me of my sister when she was little. Always smiling, always finding something good, even in the worst moments." The comment was unexpected, but no one in the diner interrupted. The words hung in the air, laden with unspoken emotions. Jack cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. "Look, I don't know what burdens everyone here is carrying, but I know one thing: nobody's spending the night out there." He turned his gaze to the old man. "I've got a small room in the back. It's not much, but it's warm. You can stay there until you figure something else out." The man blinked, stunned. "You'd do that for us?" Jack shrugged, trying to mask his kindness with indifference. "It's not just for you. If I let you go back out in this storm, I wouldn't sleep tonight." Lizzie stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Her grandfather squeezed her hand, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, from the bottom of my heart." Hannah smiled, but the moment's peace was interrupted by an unexpected sound. The diner's back door creaked open, letting in a gust of icy wind. "Who left that door open?" Jack asked, frowning as he walked over to shut it. As he approached, he stopped abruptly. Something outside had caught his attention. "There's someone out there," Jack said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Hannah hurried to his side, and what she saw in the darkness of the storm made her heart race. Jack stared intently into the darkness beyond the open door. The wind carried snowflakes that quickly began accumulating on the diner's floor, but what made him hesitate wasn't the cold or the noise of the storm. "What did you see, Jack?" Hannah asked, pulling her coat tighter against the biting wind. Jack pointed outside, his words halting. I think there's someone out there. Near the storage shed." Hannah squinted, trying to see through the swirling snow. Amidst the blinding white, a shadowy figure seemed to stumble, barely upright. "Wait here," Jack said, grabbing a flashlight from the counter. "You're not going alone," Hannah insisted, wrapping a scarf around her neck. "Don't be stubborn." But Hannah followed anyway. They stepped out into the storm, bracing against the icy gusts. Each step felt like a battle, but eventually, they reached the small shed by the diner. As they approached, the shadowy figure became clearer, a man, collapsed in the snow, his clothes drenched and utterly inadequate for the freezing temperatures. "Quick, help me lift him!" Hannah exclaimed. Together, they managed to hoist the man to his feet. He was barely conscious, mumbling incoherently, though he seemed to be trying to say something. "Inside." "Now," Jack commanded. Back in the diner, all eyes turned toward them as they carried the man to a chair near the fireplace. He was trembling violently, his face as pale as the snow outside. "Get those wet clothes off him," Hannah instructed, rushing to grab blankets and a bowl of hot soup. As they worked to warm him up, the man slowly began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, before scanning his surroundings in confusion. Where am I?" he rasped. "You're safe," Hannah said gently, taking his hand. "We found you outside, nearly frozen." The man tried to speak again but coughed, his words lost. "What's your name?" Jack asked, arms crossed, his tone cautious but curious. The man looked at Jack, then at the old man and Lizzie, who were now watching with a mix of concern and intrigue. "My name is Sam," he managed to say. Lizzie, standing close to her grandfather, tilted her head, her curiosity overcoming her shyness. "Why were you in the snow, Sam?" Sam blinked, still disoriented, as if searching his memory for an answer. "I was looking for someone." Hannah knelt beside him, her voice soft but steady. "Who were you looking for?" Sam hesitated, his eyes darting around the room before finally settling on Lizzie and the old man. "You." The diner fell silent. "What do you mean, us?" the old man asked, his arm protectively pulling Lizzie closer. Sam took a shaky breath, his hands trembling, whether from the cold or nerves, no one could tell. "I knew Clara. Your daughter." Before he paused, searching for the right words. "Before she passed, she asked me to find you. She said you'd need help, that you had no one else." Sam's words seemed to reverberate in the small diner. The old man's eyes widened, disbelief and emotion battling within him. "Clara spoke of us?" Sam nodded slowly. "She told me about Lizzie, about how much she meant to you. She made me promise that if I ever had the chance, I'd do whatever I could to help you." Lizzie glanced up at her grandfather, her expression puzzled but trusting, while he appeared on the verge of breaking down. "You knew my Clara? How was she?" Sam smiled faintly, despite his frailty. "She was strong. Even in her final days, all she thought about was you too. She asked me to give you something." Reaching into his coat's inner pocket, Sam fumbled with trembling hands until Hannah stepped in to help. From the pocket, she pulled out a small, weathered envelope. Sam handed it to the old man, his gaze steady despite the emotion in his voice. "It's for you." With shaking hands, the old man took the envelope. Lizzie watched, her curiosity mixed with apprehension, as he carefully unfolded it. Inside was a handwritten letter, the ink slightly smudged but still legible. The first lines made the old man's eyes well up with tears. "Dad, if you're reading this, I hope you've found someone kind enough to take care of you and Lizzie. You were the best father I could have asked for, and I want you to know that everything I did was for the two of you. Never give up, even when it feels like the world has turned against you." The diner was completely silent as the old man held the letter with trembling hands. Each word written by his daughter seemed to warm his heart but also reopened wounds that had never fully healed. Lizzie, standing beside him, looked at the envelope and then at her grandfather with innocent curiosity. "What did Mommy say, Grandpa?" The old man took a deep breath and wiped his eyes, trying to summon the strength to read the rest of the letter aloud. She wanted us to know that we were always in her thoughts, sweetheart." He turned to Sam, who was now wrapped in blankets, taking slow sips of warm soup under Hannah's watchful care. "You were really with Clara? Where did you find her?" Sam lowered the bowl, still looking weary but resolute to answer. "I met Clara when she was taken to a community hospital a few months ago. She was very sick, but she never stopped talking about you too. Even through everything, she cared more about Lizzie than herself." The old man's eyes shone with a mix of sadness and pride. "That sounds like her, always putting others first." Sam continued. "Clara knew her time was running out, but she wanted to make sure you wouldn't be left alone. She wrote this letter and made me promise to deliver it. Things got complicated, and it took me longer than I wanted to find you." Lizzie tugged at her grandfather's sleeve, her wide eyes filled with questions. "What else did Mommy say?" The old man gently stroked her hair and turned back to the letter. This time, he read it aloud. "Lizzie, my little star, if you're hearing Grandpa read this, know that Mommy loves you more than anything in the world. Never stop smiling, because your smile brightens even the darkest days. Promise Grandpa that you'll be strong and that you'll keep believing that good things can still happen." Lizzie, with tears streaming down her face, threw her arms around her grandfather, burying her face in his chest. He held her tightly, as if he never wanted to let her go. "We'll be strong, my little star. Always," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Hannah, watching the scene unfold, had to turn away to hide her own tears. Even Jack, trying to maintain his usual tough demeanor, seemed moved by the emotional exchange. "What do we do now?" Lizzie asked, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. The old man looked at Sam. "You said Clara wanted us to meet. But beyond that, what did she hope for?" Sam paused, his expression thoughtful, before responding. "Clara wanted you to have a fresh start. She asked me to help you find a safe place, somewhere Lizzie could grow up and you could finally have some peace." "A safe place," the old man echoed, his mind racing. At that moment, Hannah, unable to remain silent any longer, stepped in. "Maybe that place is here," she said. Everyone turned to her, startled. "What do you mean?" the old man asked. Hannah gave a small, tentative smile. "Jack has that little room in the back of the diner, doesn't he?" She looked at Jack, waiting for his reaction. "It's not much," Jack began, but Hannah cut him off. "It doesn't matter how small it is. It's a start. And while you're here, Lizzie can stay warm, be fed, and maybe even find a little sense of normalcy." The old man looked down at Lizzie, who, despite everything, seemed hopeful. He knew he couldn't turn down such a generous offer. "That would be a huge relief," he said finally, shaking Hannah's hand. "I don't know how to thank you." As the old man spoke, Lizzie turned her attention to Sam, her curiosity shining through. "Will you stay here too?" Sam hesitated, his gaze shifting toward the window where the storm still raged on. "That depends on a few things, Lizzie. But if you'll have me, I'd like to help however I can." The old man gave him a faint smile, but before he could respond, a distant rumble of thunder echoed through the night, a reminder that the storm was far from over. The silence after the howling wind was filled only by the crackle of the firewood in the hearth. Lizzie, her cheeks still rosy from the warmth, watched Jack with curiosity. He stood by the counter, hands in his pockets, his expression wavering between skepticism and something more difficult to decipher. "You can stay in the back room," Jack said, his voice firm but tinged with weariness. "But that's all I can offer for now. I'm not making any promises past tonight." The old man rose slowly, the weight of Clara's letter still heavy in his hands. "I understand, and thank you, sir. What you've offered is already more than we've had in months." Lizzie clutched her grandfather's hand, her eyes shining with hope despite her exhaustion. "Thank you, Mr. Jack," she said softly, her sincerity cutting through the room. Jack averted his eyes, as though unsure how to respond to such pure gratitude. "We'll see how things are tomorrow." As Jack turned back to the counter, Hannah pulled the old man aside. "Don't mind him," she whispered. "He's got a good heart. It just takes time for him to show it." The old man nodded, though there was a flicker of something deeper in his gaze, a mix of resolve and pride. He didn't want to be seen as just a burden, especially not to Lizzie. "I made a promise to my daughter," he said, looking at Hannah. "I swore I'd take care of Lizzie and never let her lose her smile. I don't want anyone thinking I'm just here to take charity." Hannah placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, her expression sincere. "You're a father and a grandfather. That's enough to deserve help." The old man gave a faint smile, but before he could respond, Lizzie tugged at his sleeve. "Grandpa, can I see the little room?" "Of course, sweetheart. Let's go." Hannah accompanied them to the back room. It wasn't much, a single bed, an old dresser, and a small window with frost gathering on the glass. But to Lizzie, it might as well have been a castle. "We have a place all to ourselves," she exclaimed, bouncing onto the bed and laughing. The old man watched her, his heart warmed by her joy. In that simple space, she had found a glimmer of hope. As Lizzie explored the room, Jack appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Let me make one thing clear," he said, his tone gruff. "I'm not against helping, but I'm not responsible for anyone." The old man met Jack's gaze, his lined face steady. "I never asked you to be responsible for us. All I need is a chance to start over." "And how do you plan to do that?" Jack asked skeptically. Hannah, sensing the tension, stepped in. "Maybe he could work here," she suggested. "With his skills, he could help with maintenance or the storage area." Jack scoffed but didn't dismiss the idea outright. "I'll think about it." Lizzie appeared in the doorway, holding a folded blanket in her arms. "Mr. Jack, are you the one who makes the bread? Grandpa says it smells like the bread Mommy used to bake." For a moment, Jack seemed disarmed, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, kid. That's me." "Then you're really good at it," Lizzie said with a smile so pure it softened even Jack's hardened exterior. As the night wore on, the storm outside began to wane, but the old man knew the real challenge was just beginning, proving that he and Lizzie were not a burden, but a blessing. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the diner surrounded by a serene, snow-covered landscape. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee and homemade bread filled the air. Lizzie, now with a bit more color in her cheeks, sat at one of the tables as Hannah placed a bowl of warm porridge in front of her. "Eat as much as you like," Hannah said with a wink. The old man helped Lizzie eat, but his focus was on Jack, who moved about the counter with his usual stern efficiency. Finally, the old man rose and approached him. "Mr. Jack, I've been thinking about what you said last night. About how I could contribute." Jack paused, raising an eyebrow. "And? I worked as a carpenter for years. I can fix the creaky chairs, reinforce the tables, or help with the firewood. I just need a chance." Hannah beamed with pride as she watched the old man muster his courage. Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Let's give it a trial run. If you do a good job, we'll talk about something more permanent." The old man nodded, trying to hide the relief that swept over him. "Thank you. You won't regret it." Later that day, as he worked on the chairs in the dining area, Lizzie played with some scrap wood she'd found in the storage room. "What are you making, little star?" he asked. "A little house for us," Lizzie said, holding up two mismatched pieces of wood with pride. The old man chuckled, feeling a rare surge of hope. From a distance, Jack watched them quietly. Though he didn't say it aloud, he was beginning to reconsider his initial judgment. That evening, after a full day of repairs and small improvements, Jack approached the old man as he cleaned up his makeshift tools. "You did good work today," Jack said, his voice softer than usual. The old man looked up, surprised but grateful. "Just trying to do my part." Jack nodded. "I think I can offer you more than just that back room for a few days. Let's see how this goes, but maybe there's a place for you here after all." The old man couldn't hold back the tears, though this time they were tears of relief. As Lizzie slept soundly, tucked under a warm blanket, the old man sat beside her, holding Clara's letter one more time. He gazed out the frosted window, where the stars now glittered in the clear night sky. "Thank you, Clara," he whispered. "We've found a home." The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The old man and Lizzie found not just shelter at the diner, but a new sense of purpose. Jack, once wary and hesitant, began to recognize the value Harold brought to the place. Mornings were filled with the sound of Harold's steady footsteps as he inspected chairs and tables, tightening loose screws and polishing worn surfaces. Lizzie, with her infectious joy, quickly charmed the customers, often delivering fresh bread to the tables with her shy yet heartwarming smile. "Looks like you've got yourself an assistant, Jack," Hannah teased, watching Lizzie flit around the dining area with her little basket of bread.
"Yeah,
"But she eats half the stock," Jack replied with a faint grin, a sight no one would have imagined during their first days together. Over time, Jack and Harold developed an unlikely partnership. Harold took charge of the small storage area in the back, organizing supplies and chopping firewood to keep the diner warm through the bitter winters. He even built a rustic yet elegant shelf to display the fresh bread, which had become one of the diner's main attractions. "Who made that?" a curious customer would ask, pointing to the sturdy, handcrafted display. Jack, proud of his team, would reply without hesitation. "Harold. He's a real craftsman." As time passed, Lizzie began attending the local school. Jack, who often claimed he didn't want to get too involved, was the first to insist she needed proper books and a decent uniform. "Consider it an investment," he said gruffly, placing the neatly wrapped package on the table. Harold, taken aback, couldn't find the words to respond, but the firm handshake he gave Jack spoke volumes. The diner had become one of the busiest spots in the small town, its success partly owed to the unexpected pair who had become integral to its operations, Harold, with his skilled hands and quiet wisdom, and Lizzie, who had blossomed into a confident and vibrant young woman. Harold remained the diner's go-to for maintenance, but he had also become a mentor to the younger staff, who often sought his advice. His patience and life experience drew them to him like a magnet. Lizzie, on the other hand, was the heart of the place. She greeted customers with warmth and created new dessert recipes, a talent she proudly attributed to her mother, Clara. "This place has never felt so alive," Hannah remarked during a rare moment of rest. Jack nodded in agreement, glancing toward the workshop Harold had set up behind the diner. "I never thought I'd need someone to remind me what community really means," Jack admitted, his voice softer than usual. But Harold and Lizzie did just that. One night, after the diner had closed, Harold sat beside Jack at the counter. Lizzie and Hannah were cleaning tables, laughing about something only they seemed to understand. "I think we've found our place, Jack," Harold said, gazing at Lizzie with pride.
Yeah,
"I think you have," Jack replied, pouring 2 cups of coffee. He hesitated before continuing. "You know, I used to judge people too quickly. When you walked through that door, I thought you were just another sad story, another weight to carry. But I was wrong." Harold smiled, his hands weathered but steady as they cradled the warm cup. "We all need someone to give us a chance, Jack. You gave us that, and we'll never forget it." One night, after closing up, Lizzie found a box of her grandfather's tools. Inside was a wooden frame he had meticulously carved over the years. Inside the frame, he had carefully preserved Clara's letter, a reminder of the promise he'd made to never give up. Lizzie carried the frame to Harold, who was sitting near the fire. "It's ready, Grandpa," she said, her eyes shining with pride. Harold took the frame and read his daughter's words once more. "Never stop believing that good things can happen." He stood and placed the frame on the diner's counter, where everyone could see it. Jack noticed the gesture and nodded.
yeah,
He said. "That sums up what we're all about now." The diner became more than a place for meals. It became a sanctuary, a home, and a constant reminder that even in the worst storms, hope can lead to a new beginning. And now, we'd love to hear from you. If you were in Jack's shoes, would you open your heart to someone like Harold and Lizzie? Have you ever experienced or witnessed a moment where a simple act of kindness changed the course of someone's life? Share your story with us in the comments. We're eager to hear your experiences and reflections. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the power of kindness and compassion. This is Narratives That Embrace. Stay blessed, and we'll see you in the next story.